Hi, I just wanted to do a video check-in and maybe talk about a couple of the new concepts in the system and user security section, along with creating users and groups. So first, I wanted to bring to your attention that there is, under the assignments in system and user security, something called the home stretch checkup. It's worth 10 points for you to do, and no right or wrong answers. It's really just to take the pulse of the class regarding how you're adjusting to doing your work online, and if there is anything that could be done by me or your fellow classmates to make your transition easier to bear. So in the System and User Security unit, your workload is pretty light. You just need to read in the Networking Academy the chapter materials and complete the exam. So after you do the home stretch checkup survey or questionnaire and the exam, it will be just fine to move on to the next unit, creating users and groups. And I have added to that section a resource which you can open in Adobe Acrobat, and I think it's a really good resource, so I highly recommend it to you. You can see the material partly here on the screen. It is from the Linux Professional Institute and CompTIA. It is a really good chapter of their online book. You can, because it is an Adobe Acrobat file, put in a search term like I've done here, like user add, and jump right to that section and read about the command and look at some examples. Get a lot of material about all the different file or command options that are available for the command. So it's really like an enhanced command guide and gives a lot of really great information. So I recommend that you use that resource. So let's look at the Linux box for a moment. And if you don't have Linux Mint installed, then go ahead over to the Networking Academy and use the virtualized Linux there. And just a couple of starting concepts. Two very important files that are related to users and we'll find groups as well are in the Etsy directory. And that would be the password file and the group file. And we'll also find that the shadow file is important as well. So I recommended you take note about all three of these files when you do the reading. And notice one big difference about the Etsy shadow file, and that relates to its permissions mask. It is different from group and PASSWD, sometimes just pronounced password. But just make sure that the spelling is PASSWD. You can see that I am logged in under a normal level user account. Notice I used the ID command. And we can see that my logged in account name is NOS120. My group name is also the name NOS120. Even though the name is the same, they could be different names. It just happens to be that Linux Mint is called a UPG system, user private group. So by default, when you add a user, that user is a member of a group by the exact same name and is the sole member of that group. You can see that each user has a numeric UID, user ID, and a numeric group ID. For my account, it happens to be 1000. My account, because it's the primary account on the system, is also a member of many other groups besides its user private group, and we can see those as the output of the ID command as well. But the big point that I was trying to make is my user account is just, the average Joe account. And as such, I can do average user type things. So I can cat the password file. But if I try to cat the shadow file, I get the warning message, error message, permission denied. So just go back and look at the permissions on XeShadow so that you can understand why that happened. And also understand the fact that my user account is part of a group called sudo, which means my account, NOS120, can use the powers of account elevation. So because of that, I could sudo cat shadow, and we'll pipe that to less to get a page at a time. Put in my password, and now I am able to see the contents of that shadow file. Also, and perhaps obviously, when we're working with users and groups and we're doing administrative tasks, some of the things we'll want to do is add new users, or for users that exist, manage those users. So the two key commands would be user add and user mod. You can go back and reference again the command section of the resource material. And we can see that there's information on user add, user mod, as well as a command named PASSWD, different from the password file, and then user del to delete user accounts. So please use this resource for finishing any work that you need to do. Let's look at the man page for user add. Obviously, it is to create a new user or update default user information. Its most simple use is user add followed by a new login name. It is what's called the low-level utility for adding users. And on Debian-based systems, of which Linux Mint is one, there is a higher level utility called add user, which bundles some of the default options into like a little wizard script, so is a lot more foolproof. But sometimes you're specifically asked to use the low-level utility. So that being said, let's look at some of the options. Specifically, -C allows you to add a commentary. -D allows you to specify a specific home directory. Later on, we might look at -E for an expiration date. That would be like if you had a contractor on staff and they had a 9 or 12-month contract, you might only want their user ID to be active during that period of time. -K allows you to specify a specific directory where starter files might be. And the skeleton directory is a place where you can deposit all these, like maybe a company policy manual, a welcome message, and then each time a user's created, those files are automatically copied into that new user's home directory. You notice that by default, the etc/skell directory is the skeleton directory. And we should have those on our system as well. -M is important. That specifies that you should create a user's home directory if it does not exist. So for a brand new user, that would likely be the case. And something important to consider, the -P for password is an encrypted password, which we rarely know. So that being the case, usually when we add a new user, we do not use the -P. We have to use the separate PASSWD command to initiate a user's password, and we'll show you that in just a moment. -S will specify the user's login shell, which we've been using bin bash, and we might want to specify that for any new user that we create. So let's just create a user. Okay. So we want to create a user and make sure they have a home directory created and the bash shell, and I will create Bob. So now I should be able to look at the last few lines in my password file, and Bob indeed has been added as a new user. Now, Bob does not have a password. So we can use the PASSWD command to enter a new Unix password for Bob. And we'll just give him the same Linux intro just to be consistent. And now Bob's password has been updated successfully. We could modify Bob's account using the user mod command, and we can add a comment so that user's password comment field will be filled in. Let's do that. We'll just give Bob a fake name, and now if we go look at Bob's command, we see that that new comment has been added. So being successful with working with users and groups is a combination of looking at the man page, referring to some external resources that you have been given, and just practicing at the command line. So give it your best, work through the questions on your assignment, study the Etsy password, Etsy shadow file, understand the format for the output in the Etsy password file. Remember, you can look the man page up in section 5 so that you can understand the 7 fields in Etsy password file, and have a great time with it.